Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm Lady T, your lecturer and social historian. We've been on this Gilded Age discussion, and one thing we find out in the Gilded Age that a lot of the elite Black people came out of Washington, D.C., and they excelled in the areas of medicine, politics, business, print, all these great, wonderful things. But one thing they also excelled in was the medical field. And what I was just so astounded to discover when I began to study is that one man is really all over the world even today, but yet you never hear his name. And I thought he was worthy of a wonderful discussion today. His name is Dr. Charles Richard Drew. And every single time you go to a college campus and see those little blood mobiles asking for you to donate, we can thank him for the preservation methods that led to this large scale and wide scale blood distribution that you see by Red Cross. So let's get into his story. It's very interesting. Again, thank you all for joining me. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. We are growing so much, y'all. We are over 2 million views here. The Royal Black and Elite channel is very, very special. And I truly thank you for going on the ride with me. So let's get into our story. This man's life is extraordinarily interesting, but not only that, sad too. When you hear about his end, wow. So let's get into his story. He was born in Washington, D.C. And like I said, it was during a time of the Black elite. It was during that era. It was June the 3rd, 1904. And his father's name was Richard, and he was a carpenter. And his mother's name was Nora Burrell, and she was a teacher. He had three sisters and one brother, and the family was considered middle class. They lived in a place called Foggy Bottoms. Have you ever heard of Foggy Bottoms? Any Washington, D.C. people here from Foggy Bottoms? To talk about Washington, D.C., seeing what's happening there. I don't like any policing of people and all that. I don't think the military should be on the street, but I have to admit, I am grateful to see people's lives being saved. And so sometimes I think we have to find a common place that we can talk about where it comes to violence against us, especially that you have to admit what the president did worked, and it did work in this situation. So I don't want to get into a political argument. I'm saying in this situation, bringing in the National Guard was probably the best thing that he could have done. People were passing away on the street. So I think Chicago, where Brandon Johnson is, should be next. And anywhere else that the local government is not doing all they can to protect its people. Or if they are doing all they can, but they are short on budget or they are short on people, they may need extra help. So I think we need to stop all this ugliness and all this craziness before we destroy a beautiful place. And Washington, D.C. was indeed a beautiful place and has beautiful history. So with that said, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I did at least want to say and acknowledge I do see what's happening in Washington, D.C. And I do think that it was needed because of the emergency they were facing. Now, Drew graduated from Dunbar High School. Shout out to Dunbar High School in 1922. Any of you or any alumni there? And he won a scholarship to a college for sports at Amherst College. He ran track and he played football. And he graduated in 1926. Now, he took a job with Morgan College, and it's funny because, most guys who graduate, who start with sports, the football coach and either the history teacher or the chemistry teacher. So in his case, he was the chemistry teacher. And though he loved teaching, he did go on and pursue his medical degree. So Dr. Drew went on to pursue his degree. He did apply to Howard and Harvard, but they both had reasons why they didn't want him. One was Howard said that he didn't meet the prerequisites, and Harvard said he had to wait a year. So he ended up going to school actually in Canada. He attended McGill's Medical School. So he graduated in 1933, and he went on to teach at Howard University. The same school told him that he couldn't attend. Now, when he was at his university, guess he graduated second. So that's pretty wonderful, graduating in the class in 1933. And he also was a member of the Alpha Omega Alpha Scholastic Honor Society. And so he was a very, very smart man. He received his degree, a doctorate of medicine and master of surgery. So there he was at Howard, and he did that for 1 year before going on to teach at the Freedmen's Hospital. And he also was an assistant surgeon there as well. He also returned to school and changed the world when he wrote his dissertation, and it was called Banked Blood, a study on blood preservation. The dissertation that he wrote earned him a Doctor of Science in Medicine from Columbia in 1940. Now, can you believe Dr. Drew was not admitted to the American Medical Association because they did not allow black doctors? So he never was admitted to that. But you know what? It doesn't matter because schools are named after him and statues have been built after him because he became one of the most well-known doctors in the world. And it was because of this invention of preserving blood. See, a year before receiving his doctorate, I wanted to say this. Before he received his doctorate, he did get married. He married a lady named Minnie Lenore Robbins in 1939, and she was a professor of economics at Spelman College. You know, smart men like smart women. They had 3 daughters and 1 son. And actually, one of his daughters, her name was Charlene Drew. She was the president of DC's Chamber of Commerce between 1969 and 2009. So in 1940, Drew was tapped by John Scudder to help administer a blood storage and preservation prototype. He had to collect and test and transport large quantities of plasma distribution to the UK. Now, this project was called the Britain Project, and it collected blood from almost 15,000 people. And you know what's so outstanding? Under his leadership, they not only collected these 15,000 vials of blood, but he also set the standard for collection in the industry. He was a very thorough man. He really practiced standard of safety and cleanliness to make sure that the plasma in the blood got back to where it needed to in good condition. So he was just an outstanding man. He was so interesting to me. You know, my daughters, we go to college, we see these blood vans, and no one ever tells you that it was a black man who created that. And he created it back in 1941 when he joined the Red Cross. You see, they wanted to figure out a way to be able to go locally and draw blood and preserve this blood. And so he did that. And that's why you see blood banks, mobile blood banks all over the world. Though Drew was an excellent leader, one problem did arise, though, with the Red Cross. You see, the Red Cross also supplied blood to the Army. Well, the Army was segregated, and they didn't want to give black people's blood to white soldiers. Well, Dr. Drew was not having that. Basically, he believed that, no matter what color you were, blood is blood, and if you needed it, it was red, and if you needed it. But they would not change their stance, and as a result, he did resign. So that's how he left the Red Cross. But you know what? He left it in protest, but he never stopped being a doctor. This is his home. It is now a historical site, and his family lived there and grew up there. So his history is just rich. Now, during this time, for about the next 8 years, he taught and he traveled. And one thing that he got involved with was a free clinic there in Tuskegee, Alabama. So what would happen is that he would still do surgery at the hospital. Then he would go and do this free clinic at Tuskegee. Well, on April 1st of 1950, he and 2 of his fellow colleagues were driving at around 8 o'clock in the morning, and they were on their way to the clinic, and he had been up all night the prior night during surgery. See, they didn't pay, even though he was inventing things. Many of our black people did not really get the accolades that they should have gotten during their lifetime, nor the money that they should have received during their lifetime. And he was no different. So he still had to work. And so even though he was out there doing some free things with the medicine there at the free clinic in Tuskegee, he did have to work. So he was working and got off that work, and he was driving that morning. And somehow, sadly, he lost control of the car. Now, it doesn't say if he dozed off for just a moment, But whatever happened, the car flipped. It flipped several times and it ended up landing and pinning him under the vehicle. Now, the other two doctors were able to survive and get out the car. But unfortunately, Dr. Drew passed on April the 1st, 1950, from his injuries. They're just so sad. He left his beautiful wife and their three daughters and son behind, and an enormous legacy that is worthy of this lecture and worthy to be celebrated because of him. Blood is being able to be preserved and lives being saved all over the world. So I hope that you enjoyed today's lecture about Dr. Drew. Had you ever heard of him? You know, I always ask that. You all don't forget Hunter's Point is coming out where we bring these people to life. And I'm just so excited about our new drama coming out on October the 10th, 2025. Now, as you know, my lectures are for educational and entertainment purposes only, and the FAIR Act use is in effect. And my references were Father of Blood Banking, the National Library of Medicine, and Charles R. Drew, professor in science. So I want to thank you all for joining me. Don't forget, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And log down below. There's a lot of great videos for you to continue watch. Thanks for joining me for today, and I'll see you on another great episode.